While House Republicans push forward with their impeachment inquiry, the Biden campaign is desperately searching for ways to calm growing concerns around our 81-year-old president's fitness to lead. Just yesterday, cameras captured President Biden stumbling up the short steps on Air Force One. Remember, he takes that short staircase as opposed to the longer, more elaborate one. And this happened moments after he swapped out his comfier shoes for a pair of dress shoes. And if it wasn't bad enough, the Secret Service is reportedly putting agents at the bottom of the stairwell just in case. Now, it seems like the Biden campaign has lost control of their own narrative. Americans, Democrats, even the liberal media are asking the question, who is Plan B if Biden can't finish his campaign? Look at all those headlines. But what about if he drops out? The president, well, he's dismissing those concerns.
Mr. President, good afternoon, sir. You're going to California. Is this about coming up with a Plan B for 2024? Does Gavin need to stand by?
Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm looking at you.
Yes,
We're looking at you.
Sir, Nikki
hey,
Haley or Donald
whoa.
You know, Tammy, I think the dismissive, confident approach, probably the correct one as you answer those questions, but you can't dismiss the American people. Monmouth, 48% say it's somewhat or very likely that Biden is not the nominee, as opposed to 50% who say not at all likely that he will be replaced.
Yes, and that's a statement, I think, more, it's certainly about Biden, but it's also about the Democrats, I think, in general. Now, the Republicans have some work to do more than just we're not them. But the fact is that, and I think the American people realize this, that even with his shortcomings, if things were going well, it would telegraph that the team is doing well, that the government is working smoothly. While it's not a one-person show in Washington, leadership matters, right? That individual matters. So there's recognition. They try to make it just about age or frailty. Again, he could be frail. And everything could be moving smoothly, but it's not. And the Democrats don't want to have a conversation about policy. They don't want to have a conversation about the economy, about the border, about what's going on at schools, about all the cultural issues, about, my goodness, the meltdown in the international scene, the wars that seem to continue to build. So that's what's on people's minds. And I think they can escape that conversation by having him not trip. That's incorrect.
It is incorrect. You know, there's this saying, you know, with friends like these, who needs enemies? Well, I want to change that to with surrogates like these. This is the Biden campaign co-chair. And listen to how enthusiastic he is pumping up his candidate.
The country is in a very difficult time right now. As you guys have said from a moment ago, the world is in a very difficult crisis, and we have a moment at this time to make a right decision about what the future of the country and the future of the world is going to be about. So to expect everybody to be happy and excited, I think, is just unreasonable.
I mean, Harris, if you detach the name and just put the words, it almost sounds like a Trump surrogate.
No, I mean, seriously, that's managing expectations.
Yes.
I mean, that is setting the bar so low, you could literally just have a baby crawl over it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really low. I was fascinated by this in media. Biden instructing aides to ramp up highlighting the blank stuff. I mean, all of it is expletives coming out of Trump's mouth. And then it says here, the network's senior White House correspondent was witnessing some of the things from behind the scenes. And this one part, I thought, said it all. They want to focus all on Trump and not on any of the things that Tammy Bruce just talked about, and certainly not on the president. As one senior campaign advisor put it recently, they have been surprised by how many people appear to be, quote unquote, putting on rose-colored glasses when looking back at the Trump years, a reality that the campaign says they must alter by constantly reminding voters of what Trump stands for. Oh, that's going to actually be a thing for Trump. That'll help him out. So they're going to talk about him more and more and more and more and more at a time when he soaks up unearned media appearances, because everybody takes what he does, except for the networks that don't spell anything, the alphabet soup networks. Fox spells word. But they're going to actually focus more on him and not deal with what the polling is showing, and that is people are worried about the president.
Well, there's two camps, Emily, in Biden world. They know they have a problem, and there's one camp, to Harris's point, who says, let's focus on Trump. Let's amplify anything he says. The hazard with that strategy is Trump had a great town hall last night. He was on message. all on the issues. And you contrast that with like a blood red MAGA Biden speech, and there's really a contrast.
Well, I think the simplicity of Trump's presentation is sort of augmented by the fact that he's just saying the truth. My revenge will be my success. I listened to you. An attack on me is an attack on you. Those are truths, and they're simple to understand. And I think the continued word salad we're subjected to by the person in the White House and the vice president are because they're covering up all of the failures of policies. And the interesting thing about this conversation about who's Plan B, to me, is that it illustrates that it's not automatically Kamala Harris, that it's not automatically his vice president. That we shouldn't be having this conversation. If there's a plan B to the president, it should be automatically the vice president. I note a comment this week by a surrogate as well that said, you know, the softening support of people of color means that the role of Kamala Harris right now cannot be overstated. And the point is that sort of insinuating that by virtue of her skin color, that will automatically attract voters of the same or similar skin colors. Why don't they just change policy? Why don't they underscore the policies that have helped all Americans, regardless of skin color? It's because there are none. They're trying to hide their failures by playing that shell game, by playing the word game, by saying who's next and don't worry about it. But at the end of the day, we are worried about it because only 20% of Americans are happy with the state of the nation, and an abysmal less than 30% approve of Kamala and less than 40% approve of this president.
And yet plan number one is focus all on Trump. But plan number two among the Democrat surrogates is to focus all on Biden, who is very unpopular, to your point, Emily. Ezra Klein, New York Times, this stood out to me, David. I was talking to James Carville, he says, who's one of the chief strategist behind Bill Clinton's 1992 campaign, and he put this really well to me. He said to me that a campaign has certain assets, but the most desirable asset is the candidate, and the Biden campaign does not deploy Biden like he is a desirable asset, perhaps because he is not desired by the American people.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking at the realities. I could take a little from each of you and put this together into what the Republican strategy needs to be, and there's a lot more to it. Tammy, to your point, you know, as long as the argument is over just cognitive ability and is he too old for the job, that actually benefits the Democrats because they'll gather up their base. The falsity in playing the you ain't black enough, remember Joe Biden and that, Emily, is trying to say that it's softening support for Kamala Harris because if you're a black man or woman, Harris, you're expected to vote for the black in the room. I'll give you an example of how they're pushing this. Biden's video that went out with the black father and the two children, carefully crafted, fried chicken and all these things at the table. Then HHS puts out a video by Levine, you know, the, quote, four-star admiral who's a trans woman, a transgender person. But yet I went through the list, and there are 11 or 12 senior black officials at HHS ranked above Levine who should have been used in this video. And to them, in Black History Month, and my history is 24/7, every day of the year. Black history is American history. But in that, they insult all the other blacks in the department, PhDs, masters in public health, men and women who are black, to put out, I won't even say it because I'm going to be nice on TV.
That person checks more boxes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's just say, let's be adults in the room,
black
since
people,
that's what Democrats like.
But are black people sitting somewhere in a neighborhood going, you know what, just because you said it, I'm black, I must
they're trying
go
to
along.
figure out how they're going to pay the expenses of groceries and inflation that continues to grow in the wrong direction again under this president. Yeah. And the color is green. It's not brown. It's not black.
Exactly.
And by the way, who does Kamala Harris really represent? I thought she represented the American people, in which case they would be American policies. I don't care what boxes she checked. Right? She's got to check the box of well done job. When can she check that box?
Nowhere.
I think the American people aren't interested in box checking. They are interested in higher paychecks and being able to afford homes and bringing down interest rates, and the list goes on, and a secure border.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kayleigh McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.